The dust rose in plumes behind the stagecoach as it rumbled into Greeley, Colorado territory in the spring of 1871. Inside, Olivia Jensen clutched her journal to her chest and peered through the curtained window at the town that would become her home. The daughter of a Boston publisher had come west not for marriage or family obligations, but with ambitions that no proper lady would dare voice aloud to document the true stories of frontier women for Eastern newspapers. Last stop, Greeley. The driver called out, and the wheels groaned to a halt in front of the town's modest hotel. Olivia stepped down, her practical blue traveling dress already coated in a fine layer of dust. At 24, she was neither young enough to be considered a blushing debutante nor old enough to be dismissed as a spinster. Her honey brown hair was pinned sensibly beneath her hat, and her green eyes took in every detail of the Main Street, the saloon, general store, small newspaper office, and cluster of men eyeing her with undisguised curiosity. "Miss Jensen," a portly man in a fine suit approached her. "Mayor Townsend at your service. We received your letter about renting the room above the bookshop." "Yes, thank you for arranging it." Olivia extended her gloved hand, which the mayor shook with hesitation. "I must say your request was unusual, a single lady coming to write about the West." He chuckled nervously. "Most women come here as mail-order brides or to join family." "I'm not most women, Mayor Townsend," Olivia replied with a polite smile. "My father's publishing connections have secured me commissions from 3 Eastern newspapers. They're quite interested in authentic accounts of frontier life, particularly from a woman's perspective." The mayor's expression tightened. "Well, Miss Jensen, Greeley is a respectable settlement founded on temperance principles. We have many God-fearing families and a growing economy. I trust your writings will reflect that favorably." "I intend to write the truth as I observe it, sir." Something in her straightforward gaze made the mayor clear his throat. "Yes, well, let me escort you to your accommodations." As they walked, Olivia noticed how the townspeople stared. Women in calico dresses whispered behind their hands. Men paused their conversations to watch her pass. She was used to scrutiny. A woman traveling alone always invited speculation, but something about these gazes felt more judgmental than curious. The room above the bookshop was small but clean, with a narrow bed, writing desk beside the window, and a wash basin in the corner. After the mayor departed with another nervous smile, Olivia unpacked her trunk, arranging her writing materials on the desk with particular care. Her father had given her 6 months to prove herself before he expected her to return to Boston and accept one of the marriage proposals that had been presented to her. 6 months to capture the real stories of the frontier, not the sensationalized tales that Eastern readers devoured. The next morning, Olivia set out to introduce herself to the women of Greeley. She started at the general store where several women were gathered around the dry goods counter. "Good morning," she said brightly. "I'm Olivia Jensen, recently arrived from Boston. I'm writing a series of articles about women's experiences in frontier settlements." The silence that greeted her was immediate and uncomfortable. One older woman in a faded dress looked Olivia up and down before speaking. "Articles, for whom?" "The Boston Herald primarily, though I have arrangements with the New York Tribune and Harper's Bazaar as well." A younger woman with a baby on her hip frowned. "You mean to write about us, for people back east to read?" "Yes, exactly." Olivia smiled, relieved at the understanding. "I believe Eastern readers have a distorted view of Western life, especially regarding women's roles and experiences. I'd like to correct that through authentic accounts." The store fell silent again until the older woman spoke. "I don't see what's so interesting about our lives that fancy Eastern folks need to know." "I believe your experiences are valuable," Olivia explained earnestly. "The courage it takes to build a life here, to raise families in such challenging conditions." A laugh cut her off sharp and dismissive. Soon others joined in, and Olivia felt her face growing hot. "Challenging conditions," one woman mocked. "Listen to her fancy words. What would you know about hard work with those soft hands?" Another chimed in. We don't need some Eastern blue stocking making us into characters in a story, the older woman declared. The laughter grew, echoing in the small store. Olivia stood frozen, her notebook clutched in her suddenly trembling hands. This was not the welcome she had anticipated. "Ladies," the shopkeeper finally intervened, though his mouth twitched with amusement, "let's remember our manners." But the damage was done. Olivia nodded stiffly and turned to leave, dignity wrapped around her like armor. As she reached the door, a tall figure blocked her path. She looked up into the face of a man unlike any she'd seen in Boston. Sun-browned skin stretched over high cheekbones, and piercing blue eyes regarded her from beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. He wasn't dressed like the townsmen in their suits and ties, but in the practical gear of a working cowboy: denim pants, chambray shirt, leather vest, and boots caked with the dust of the trail. "Excuse me," she murmured, attempting to step around him. Instead of moving aside, he removed his hat and addressed the still chuckling women behind her. "Seems to me," he said in a voice like worn leather, "that laughing at somebody asking honest questions isn't the welcome Greeley claims to offer newcomers." The laughter died immediately. Olivia looked back to see the women's faces transform from mockery to something like wariness. "This isn't your business, Zachary," the shopkeeper said, no longer amused. "Then I'll silence them with the truth," the cowboy Zachary replied evenly. This town was built by newcomers with dreams folks back east laughed at. Temperance colonies and farming cooperatives weren't exactly fashionable ideas, but here you all are, prospering because somebody believed in those dreams enough to write about them, to bring people here. He turned to Olivia, his expression unreadable. "Miss, I believe you dropped this." He held out a pencil she hadn't realized she'd dropped in her embarrassment. As she reached for it, he added quietly, "Not everyone here fears the truth." With that, he settled his hat back on his head, nodded once, and walked out the door, leaving Olivia standing amidst a silence now tinged with shame rather than mockery. Back in her room that evening, Olivia wrote in her journal, her pencil moving swiftly across the page. Greeley presents itself as a progressive community, founded on noble principles of temperance and cooperation. Yet beneath this veneer lies the same fear of outsiders, particularly women who step beyond prescribed boundaries, that I encountered in Boston society. Today, I was laughed at simply for speaking my intentions plainly. Is it my gender that threatens them, or the power of the written word? Perhaps both. Only one person spoke in my defense, a cowboy named Zachary, who clearly stands apart from town society. His intervention raises questions. Who is he? Why would an outsider defend another outsider? And most intriguingly, what truths does he believe need to be told about this place? The next morning, Olivia decided to try a different approach. Instead of addressing groups, she would speak to women individually. She started with the milliner, whose small shop displayed hats far more practical than fashionable. "Good morning," Olivia said, entering the quiet shop. "I admire your workmanship." The milliner, a woman of perhaps 40 with graying hair twisted into a severe bun, looked up from her sewing. "Thank you. Are you looking for a hat, Miss Jensen? News travels fast in Greeley." "I'm sure it does," Olivia smiled. "Actually, I was hoping to ask about your experiences establishing a business here as a woman." "I'm writing—" "Yes, I've heard," the woman interrupted, her needle pausing. "Articles for Eastern papers. I'm afraid I don't have time for interviews, Miss Jensen. I have orders to fill." "I understand completely. Perhaps I could observe your work. The craftsmanship that goes into practical frontier millinery would fascinate my readers." The woman's mouth tightened. "My work isn't a curiosity for Easterners to marvel at. Now, if you'll excuse me." Defeated again, Olivia left the shop. Her experiences at the bakery, laundry, and schoolhouse followed similar patterns: polite but firm rejections, sometimes accompanied by barely concealed disdain. By midday, she found herself sitting alone on a bench outside the post office, wondering if her entire premise had been misguided. Found any good stories yet? She looked up to find Zachary standing before her, one shoulder leaned against the post office wall. In daylight, she could see details she'd missed yesterday: a small scar along his jawline, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the weathered lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than he frowned. "Not a single one," she admitted. "It seems no one wants to talk to me. They're scared." "Of me?" Olivia couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "I'm hardly threatening," his mouth quirked. "Words are powerful things, Miss Jensen, especially when they travel all the way to Boston and New York. But I only want to tell true stories. I have no interest in sensationalism. Truth can be the most sensational thing of all." He straightened and gestured down the street. "Have you eaten today?" The question caught her off guard. "No, I haven't, Mrs. Lewis runs a clean dining room at the end of the street. Her chicken and dumplings are worth writing about, at least." Olivia hesitated, weighing propriety against hunger and curiosity. "I don't know your name, not fully." "Zachary Zane." He touched the brim of his hat. "Ranch foreman at the Big Sky, about 10 miles out of town." "Olivia Jensen." She stood, decision made. "And I would appreciate a meal and conversation, Mr. Zane. Most folks call me Zach. Then I shall as well, provided you call me Olivia." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at her directness. Then he nodded and gestured for her to precede him down the boardwalk. Mrs. Lewis's dining room was small but immaculate, with checkered cloths on the tables and curtains at the windows. Several diners looked up when they entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval at the sight of the proper Eastern lady with the rough-hewn cowboy. Once seated, Zach ordered for both of them without consulting her, which Olivia might have found presumptuous if she weren't so hungry and uncertain of the menu. "You're a long way from home," he observed once the waitress had departed. "As are you, I suspect." "Your accent suggests Tennessee, perhaps." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Kentucky, you have a good ear. I've always been observant. It's useful for a writer." She studied him openly now. "What brought you to Colorado?" "War, then opportunity. Not much left for me back east after Shiloh." The simple statement told her more than he probably intended. A Confederate soldier, then, who had come west rather than return to a defeated homeland. Many had made the same choice after the war ended 6 years ago. "And you?" he asked. "What brings a Boston publisher's daughter to Greeley?" "Yes," he added, seeing her surprise, "I know who your father is. James Jensen's books and newspapers find their way even to cattle ranches." Olivia folded her napkin precisely. "I want to write stories that matter. Not society pages or romantic serials, but true accounts of women's lives in places like this." "Ambitious." "Is that a criticism?" "An observation." The waitress arrived with plates of golden chicken and fluffy dumplings, interrupting their conversation. After she departed, Zach continued, "Most folks here have reasons for being suspicious of outsiders asking questions, especially those connected to Eastern newspapers." "What reasons?" He took a bite before answering. 2 years back, a man came through claiming to be writing a book about frontier settlements. Charming fellow. Got people talking, sharing their stories, their hardships. 6 months later, a serialized story appeared in a Chicago paper painting Greeley as a failed experiment in temperance, full of secret drinking and hypocrisy. Olivia put down her fork. "That's terrible, but surely they don't know what to think." "But they've been burned once, and folks out here can't afford many mistakes." "Then why did you defend me yesterday? Why are you helping me now?" Zach's gaze was direct, assessing. "Because I recognize the look of someone who doesn't fit where they're supposed to be. And because I believe in giving people a chance to prove themselves." Something warm unfurled in Olivia's chest at his words. Here, finally, was someone who saw her not as an oddity or a threat, but as a person with purpose. "Then help me, Mr. Zane. If the townspeople won't talk to me, how can I tell their stories?" He considered this while they ate, the silence between them comfortable rather than strained. Finally, he said, "Start with those who have less to lose. The widow Blackburn runs the laundry. Her husband died in a mine collapse last year, leaving her with 3 children and no means of support. The town helped her set up the business, but they still whisper about how she takes in washing from the saloon girls." "The saloon girls," Olivia repeated, intrigued. Greeley's a temperance town, but that doesn't stop men from riding to Evans for drink and company. The girls there send their fine dresses to Mrs. Blackburn because she doesn't judge them like the Evans laundress does. Olivia nodded, already composing the beginning of the article in her mind. A widow defying convention to support her children, showing kindness to women even more marginalized than herself. And then there's Mei Lin, Zach continued. She runs the vegetable garden behind the Chinese laundry. Most folks won't buy from her directly, but the hotel kitchen and Mrs. Lewis here depend on her produce. A Chinese woman gardener, Olivia murmured. I had no idea. Most people don't notice those who make their lives possible. There was no judgment in his tone, just statement of fact. That's why your idea has merit, Olivia. If you truly want to tell stories that haven't been told. By the time they finished their meal, Olivia had a list of 5 women whose stories might open doors to others. The widow, the Chinese gardener, a midwife who served both town and outlying homesteads, an elderly Arapaho woman who sold herbal remedies from a small cabin at the edge of town, and the schoolteacher who had come west with the colony's founding and taught every child who'd grown up in Greeley. This is more than I hoped for, Olivia said as they left the dining room. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. They still might not talk to you. Then I shall have to be persuasive. She smiled up at him, feeling a confidence that had been absent that morning. When will you be in town again? He seemed taken aback by the direct question. Saturday, likely. We're moving cattle to summer pasture this week, but I'll need to come in for supplies. Then perhaps you'll dine with me again. I'd like to tell you how my interviews progress. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Saturday, then. As he walked her back to the bookshop, Olivia found herself studying his profile surreptitiously. He was nothing like the men she knew in Boston, no practiced charm or polished manners. Instead, there was a directness to him, an authenticity that made the gentlemen of her acquaintance seem like actors playing roles. Mr. Zane, Zach, she corrected herself as they reached her door. Why did you really help me today? He looked down at her, his expression softening slightly. Because yesterday, when they laughed, you didn't cry or run away. You stood your ground even though I could see it hurt. That kind of courage deserves support. With that simple statement, he touched his hat brim and walked away, leaving Olivia with a curious fluttering in her stomach that had nothing to do with Mrs. Lewis's excellent dumplings. The next morning, Olivia headed for the laundry at the edge of town. The building was small but well-maintained, with steam billowing from the back where large cauldrons of water would be heating over fires. A bell tinkled as she entered the front room, where a counter separated customers from the work area behind. A harried-looking woman in her 30s appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. Her brown hair was escaping its pins, and her face was flushed from the heat of the washing room. Good morning, Olivia said. Mrs. Blackburn? Yes. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly in recognition. You're the writer lady, Olivia Jensen. She extended her hand, which Mrs. Blackburn shook after a moment's hesitation. Her palm was rough with lie and labor. I was hoping I might speak with you about your business. My business, she laughed, though it held little humor. Not much to tell. Dirty clothes come in, clean clothes go out. In between, there's a lot of scrubbing and boiling and wringing. And supporting 3 children on your own, Olivia said gently. That takes remarkable strength. Mrs. Blackburn's defensive posture softened slightly. Who's been talking about me? A friend suggested you might have a story worth telling about perseverance and community. This community's been good to me, the widow admitted. After Thomas died, they took up a collection, helped me buy this equipment. I'd have ended up in the poorhouse otherwise, me and the children. May I? Olivia gestured to her notebook. When Mrs. Blackburn nodded cautiously, she began to take notes. What was the most difficult part of establishing your business? The woman considered this. Getting people to trust a woman to do a proper job, I suppose. Even though women have always done the washing, they didn't think I could run a business around it. She smiled wryly. The men were the worst, acted like I'd ruined their shirts just because I wasn't Thomas, but you proved them wrong. Had to. My children needed food and a roof. Her expression softened. Would you like to see how it works, the washing process? I would very much like that. For the next hour, Olivia rolled up her sleeves and learned the intricacies of commercial laundering. Mrs. Blackburn Sarah, as she asked to be called, showed her how to sort fabrics, the proper way to scrub collars, and the careful timing required for boiling whites. In the back room, 2 older girls were hanging sheets on lines, while a boy of about 10 worked the wringer. "My children," Sarah explained proudly. "They help before and after school. Emma's nearly 16 now. She'll be teaching soon if the school board approves her application." By the time Olivia left, her hands were red and her dress spattered with water, but her notebook was filled with details that would bring Sarah's story to life for Eastern readers. The burns on her arms from lye and steam, the ingenious pulley system her late husband had designed to hang heavy wet linens, the carefully kept ledger that showed how precariously the family balanced on the edge of solvency. Most importantly, she had Sarah's promise to introduce her to Mei Lin, the Chinese gardener whose vegetables kept the town fed through summer and autumn. Over the next 3 days, Olivia followed this pattern, letting each woman lead her to the next. From Mei Lin, who spoke in careful, precise English, and showed Olivia how she had adapted traditional Chinese growing techniques to Colorado's harsh climate, she gained an introduction to grandmother Singing Bird, the Arapaho healer who remembered when the entire region had belonged to her people. "The settlers think they discovered this land," the old woman told her, hands busy preparing a poultice of herbs. "But we knew every hill, every stream, every place where the healing plants grow. Now they come to me when their medicines fail, but they do not see the irony." From the midwife, Mrs. Thornton, Olivia learned about the isolation of frontier births, the courage of women laboring in sod houses and remote cabins, sometimes attended only by inexperienced husbands. And from Miss Applegate, the aging schoolteacher, she heard the history of Greeley's founding and the vision of education that had brought the woman west 20 years before. Each interview led to another, as word spread that the Eastern writer was genuinely interested in their lives, not seeking scandal or sensation. By Friday, women were stopping her on the street, asking if she might want to hear about running a millinery or cooking for a boarding house or nursing the town through a scarlet fever outbreak. That evening, as Olivia organized her notes at her desk, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Sarah Blackburn standing there, a bundle in her arms. "Evening, Miss Jensen. I've brought your washing." "My washing, but I didn't." Sarah smiled. "You left your shirtwaist to soak after you helped with the sheets. Remember, I finished it for you." She handed over the neatly wrapped package. "Also, I wanted to say that Mrs. Peterson at the bakery is hoping you might stop by tomorrow. She's reconsidered your request for an interview." "That's wonderful news. Thank you, Sarah." The widow hesitated, then said, "The ladies have been talking about your articles and what you've been writing. Some were concerned you might, well, make them look foolish," Olivia supplied gently, "or worse. But Mei Lin showed some of us what you'd written about her garden. It was respectful, beautiful even." She twisted her hands in her apron. "I suppose what I'm saying is, we're not used to being seen as anything but appendages to our husbands or fathers. You're seeing us as people with our own stories." Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest. "That's exactly what I hope to do, Sarah. Thank you for trusting me." After the widow left, Olivia returned to her writing with renewed vigor. She worked late into the night, shaping the stories she had gathered into the first of her articles. She titled it "The Invisible Pillars, The Women Who Build the West," focusing on how the labor of women like Sarah, Mei Lin, and the others sustained the community in ways often unacknowledged. Saturday dawned clear and bright. Olivia spent the morning at the bakery where Mrs. Peterson proudly demonstrated how she had adapted her German family recipes to the limitations of frontier ingredients. By noon, Olivia had filled another notebook and found herself eagerly anticipating her dinner with Zach, wanting to share her successes. She changed into her best day dress, a deep blue wool with minimal bustle, fashionable enough for Boston but practical enough for Greeley, and arranged her hair with more care than usual. As she pinned the last strands into place, she admitted to herself that her interest in the cowboy went beyond professional gratitude. His directness, his quiet confidence, and the intelligence behind his blue eyes had occupied her thoughts all week. At precisely 1 o'clock, she entered Mrs. Lewis's dining room to find Zach already seated at a corner table. He stood when he saw her, and she noted that he had traded his work clothes for a clean shirt and brushed jacket. His dark hair was damp, suggesting a recent visit to the barber or bath house. "You look like a woman with good news," he said as he held her chair. "The best news." Olivia couldn't contain her smile as she sat. "Nearly every woman in town has spoken with me. I have stories about childbirth and laundry and gardening and teaching ordinary things made extraordinary by the conditions here. I'm glad to hear it." His own smile was warm, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I had a feeling once they got to know you, they'd come around." "It's all thanks to you, Zach. Your suggestions opened doors that would have remained closed." He shook his head. "I just pointed you in the right direction. You did the hard work of earning their trust." As they ate, Olivia told him about her interviews, the details that had moved or surprised her, the commonalities she had discovered among women from vastly different backgrounds. "What strikes me most," she concluded, "is their resilience. These women face hardships that would break many Eastern ladies I know, yet they continue not just surviving but building something meaningful." "Like someone else I know," Zach observed quietly. Olivia felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "My hardships have been minimal by comparison." "Have they?" His gaze was steady. "You left everything familiar to come alone to a place where you knew no one, pursuing a dream most would discourage. That takes its own kind of courage." The conversation shifted then, becoming more personal. Zach told her about his Kentucky childhood, his brief time at a small college before the war pulled him away, and his journey west after Shiloh with nothing but his horse and the clothes on his back. "I started as a ranch hand, mucking stables and mending fences," he explained. "Worked my way up to foreman over 7 years. The owner's getting old now, talking about selling to one of the big cattle companies coming in from Texas. If he does," he trailed off, "you'll lose your position, likely. The new operations don't keep local men in charge. They bring their own people." "What will you do then?" He hesitated, then said, "I've been saving. Not enough for my own ranch yet, but enough to buy a small homestead claim perhaps, build something of my own." The vulnerability in this admission touched her. Here was a man planning for a future that might vanish through no fault of his own, much like the future her father had planned for her, of marriage and Boston society, that she was determined to reshape. After dinner, Zach suggested a walk. The afternoon was pleasant, with the snow-capped Rocky Mountains visible in the distance beyond the growing settlement. They strolled toward the edge of town, their conversation flowing easily between observations about Greeley and deeper exchanges about books they had read, places they hoped to see. "Do you miss Boston?" he asked as they paused to watch the sunset painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Some aspects," Olivia admitted. "The libraries, concerts, the ocean." She turned to face him. "But I've found things here I never expected. Such as freedom. To be judged on my own merits rather than my family connections. The opportunity to do work that matters." She hesitated, then added softly, "People who see me clearly." Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that had nothing to do with the setting sun. For a breathless moment, Olivia thought he might reach for her hand. Instead, he asked, "How long will you stay in Greeley?" "My father gave me 6 months to prove myself as a journalist. I've been here nearly 2 weeks now. And then, if my articles are well received, I hope to continue. Perhaps travel to other settlements, mining towns, even Indian reservations if I can secure proper introductions." She studied his face, trying to read his thoughts. "And you, will you stay if the ranch sells? I've put down roots here," he said simply. "One way or another, this is home now." They walked back to town in companionable silence, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. At her door, he removed his hat, holding it before him. "I'll be in town again Wednesday," he said. "The cattle drive should be finished by then." "I would like to see the ranch," Olivia said impulsively. For my articles, women readers would be interested in cattle operations, I think. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by consideration. It's not a proper place for a lady, rough men, rough language. I'm not easily shocked, Mr. Zane, she smiled, and I believe in seeing things firsthand. After a moment, he nodded. Wednesday, then, I'll bring a wagon to take you out to the big sky. 8 o'clock suit you? Perfectly. He hesitated, then reached for her hand. The touch was brief, his calloused fingers warm against her skin as he bent slightly in a gesture more genuine than any formal Boston bow. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Zach. As she prepared for bed that night, Olivia found herself humming a tune her mother used to play on the pianoforte. She felt lighter than she had in years, filled with purpose professionally and a personal anticipation she scarcely dared examine too closely. Sunday brought church services, where Olivia noted with satisfaction that several women who had previously avoided her now made a point of greeting her warmly. Monday and Tuesday were filled with more interviews and the completion of her first 3 articles, which she posted to Boston with a sense of accomplishment that bordered on exhilaration. Wednesday dawned with a clarity that matched her mood. Olivia dressed practically in her sturdiest skirt and a shirtwaist that would allow more freedom of movement than her usual attire. At precisely 8 o'clock, she heard the rattle of wagon wheels outside the bookshop. Zach waited below, handling the reins of a well-maintained buckboard pulled by 2 sturdy horses. He jumped down to help her up to the seat, his hands strong at her waist. Ready for a taste of ranch life? He asked as he climbed back up beside her. More than ready. The 10-mile journey passed quickly as Zach pointed out landmarks and explained the geography of the region. The land opened up beyond the town, with rolling hills giving way to meadows where cattle grazed in the distance. The mountains loomed larger here, their snow-capped peaks gleaming in the morning sun. There it is, Zach finally said, gesturing ahead. The Big Sky Ranch. A cluster of buildings came into view, a main house of hewn logs, several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn. Men on horseback moved cattle in the distance, their whoops carried faintly on the breeze. It's larger than I expected, Olivia admitted. 20,000 acres, though most is open range. Baldwin, the owner, was one of the first to bring cattle here after the war, started with 100 head. Now runs nearly 2,000. As they approached, Olivia could see activity in the yard, men carrying supplies, a cook emerging from a small building with a pan of biscuits, horses being saddled for the day's work. The wagon pulled up before the main house, and a heavy-set man with a silver beard emerged onto the porch. That you, Zane? Thought you were headed to town. Brought a visitor, Mr. Baldwin, Miss Olivia Jensen from Boston. She's writing articles about frontier life. The ranch owner's bushy eyebrows rose as he took in Olivia's appearance. A lady journalist, that's a new one. His tone wasn't unfriendly, merely surprised. Well, come on in, Miss Jensen. The wife will be pleased to have another woman to talk to. Been just her and the cook's daughter for female company since our girl married last fall. Zach helped Olivia down from the wagon, his hands lingering slightly at her waist. I'll show you around after you've met Mrs. Baldwin, he said quietly. She runs this place as much as her husband, though few would admit it. Inside, the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, with sturdy furniture, braided rugs on the plank floors, and curtains at the windows. Mrs. Baldwin, a stately woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair, welcomed Olivia with genuine warmth. A writer from Boston, how thrilling. You must tell me all about the fashions there. It's been 20 years since I've seen anything but what comes through in the mail-order catalogs. Over coffee and fresh biscuits, Olivia found herself interviewing yet another remarkable woman. Julia Baldwin had come west with her husband in 1851, traveling by wagon train to California during the gold rush, then back to Colorado when the first silver strikes hit. She had buried 3 children along the way, delivered 2 more in wilderness conditions, and helped build 3 separate ranches as they followed opportunity across the West. The secret to survival out here, Julia confided, is adaptability. Those who cling to how things were done back east don't last a season. After an hour of conversation, Zach appeared at the door. "If you're ready, Miss Jensen, I thought I'd show you the operation while the men are bringing in the last of the herd from the north pasture." With Mrs. Baldwin's blessing, Olivia followed him out into the yard. The next several hours were a whirlwind of new experiences as Zach showed her every aspect of ranch operations: the branding pens, the breaking corrals where young horses were trained, the cookhouse where meals were prepared for 20 hungry cowboys, the bunkhouse where they slept. Olivia filled page after page in her notebook, peppering Zach with questions about cattle prices, grazing rotations, and the economics of beef production. Her genuine interest seemed to please him, and he answered each question thoughtfully, explaining complex concepts in terms she could understand without ever being condescending. After lunch in the cookhouse, where the cowboys' initial wariness gave way to shy questions about Boston, and her writing, Zach suggested they ride out to see the herd. "Ride," Olivia repeated, uncertain. "I'm afraid I've never been on a horse." "No time like the present to learn," he replied with a smile. "I'll find you a gentle mare." An hour later, Olivia found herself perched somewhat precariously on a placid chestnut horse, following Zach along a well-worn trail that led up a gentle slope. Her initial terror had given way to cautious enjoyment as the mare, Buttercup, responded to her tentative guidance. "You're a natural," Zach called over his shoulder. "Just relax and move with her." At the top of the rise, he reined in his mount and waited for her to catch up. The view that greeted her took her breath away. Below stretched a vast meadow where hundreds of cattle grazed, their reddish-brown bodies dotting the landscape like mobile islands in a sea of green. Beyond, the mountains rose in majestic tiers, and above it all arched a sky so big and blue it seemed to encompass the world. "Now I understand the name," Olivia said softly. "Big Sky indeed. This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch." Zach's voice was quiet, reverent almost. "When things get difficult, I ride up here and remember why I chose this life. It's beautiful." She turned to look at him, finding his gaze already on her. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Something unspoken passed between them, a current of feeling neither was ready to name. Then a shout from below broke the moment, one of the cowboys waving up at them, signaling something to Zach. "We should head back," he said reluctantly. "Looks like Baldwin wants to speak with me." The ride back was silent, each lost in thought. When they reached the ranch yard, Zach helped her dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The contact lingered, his face close to hers as her feet touched the ground. "Zach," Baldwin's voice called from the main house porch. "Got a telegram from Denver, need to speak with you." With visible reluctance, Zach stepped back. "Wait here? This shouldn't take long." Olivia nodded, watching as he strode toward the house. Something in the set of Mr. Baldwin's shoulders suggested the news wasn't good. She busied herself with patting Buttercup's neck and adjusting her skirts, trying not to speculate. When Zach emerged 15 minutes later, his expression was grim. He walked to her side, taking Buttercup's reins automatically. "Is everything all right?" Olivia asked. "The deal's done," he said flatly. "Baldwin signed the papers by proxy yesterday. The ranch belongs to the Western Cattle Company as of next month." "Oh, Zach, I'm so sorry." She laid her hand on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "What will you do?" He looked down at her hand, then covered it with his own. "The new owners will bring their own foreman. Baldwin's negotiated a month's wages for all the men as severance." His mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "Generous by most standards. And for you, I've got my savings." "Enough to make a start somewhere," he straightened, visibly gathering himself. "We should head back to town before it gets late." The ride back to Greeley was subdued, though Zach made an effort to point out features of the landscape and answer Olivia's occasional questions. As they neared town, he finally spoke of what was clearly weighing on his mind. "There's a homestead claim available about 20 miles north of here. Good water, decent grazing, not enough for a proper ranch, but a man could run a small herd, maybe raise some horses too. You're considering it." "Been considering it for some time, just didn't expect to be making the decision so soon." He glanced at her. The thing is, it's isolated, no neighbors for miles, hard country for a man alone. Olivia's heart quickened at the implication in his words, but before she could respond, they were entering Greeley's main street. The usual afternoon bustle surrounded them, women shopping, men gathered outside the bank and newspaper office, children running errands. Miss Jensen. A boy of about 12 ran up to the wagon. "Got a telegram for you at the office, all the way from Boston. Thank you, Tommy, I'll collect it right away." Zach pulled the wagon to a halt before the telegraph office. "I'll wait," he offered. Inside, the operator handed her the yellow paper with a knowing smile. "Must be important news, Miss Jensen. Not often we get such long messages." Olivia unfolded the telegram with suddenly trembling fingers. As she read, her breath caught. Articles received. Stop magnificent work. Stop Herald, publishing first piece front page Sunday edition. Stop Tribune. And Harper's equally enthusiastic. Stop requesting 6 more articles. Immediately stop additional commission. Enclosed bank draft. Stop considering book compilation if series continues success. Stop so proud of you, daughter. Stop love, father. She read it twice, her vision blurring with tears of relief and joy. Her gamble had paid off. Her work was valued, her voice heard. This was everything she had hoped for. When she emerged from the office, Zach took one look at her face and said, "Good news, I take it. The best." She handed him the telegram, watching as he read it, his expression softening into a genuine smile. "Congratulations, Olivia. This is well deserved." "Thank you." She reclaimed the telegram, folding it carefully. "It changes things, though. How so?" "My father initially gave me 6 months to prove myself. Now it seems I can continue my work indefinitely." She looked up at him. "I need to decide where to base myself, whether to stay in Greeley or move on to other settlements." Something flickered in his eyes, hope, perhaps. "And have you decided?" "Not yet." She hesitated, then added, "There are factors to consider beyond my work." They had reached the bookshop. Zach helped her down from the wagon, but instead of saying goodbye, he secured the horses to the hitching post. "May I come up?" "There's something I'd like to discuss with you." The propriety of inviting a man to her private rooms should have given her pause, but Olivia found she trusted Zach implicitly. "Of course." Upstairs, her small room was neat but cluttered with the tools of her trade, notebooks stacked on every surface, newspaper clippings pinned to the walls, reference books borrowed from the town's modest library. Zach removed his hat as he entered, his tall frame making the space seem even smaller. "I apologize for the mess," Olivia said, hastily clearing books from the room's only chair. "Please sit." Instead, he remained standing, turning his hat in his hands in a gesture that betrayed uncharacteristic nervousness. "Olivia, I'm not a man who speaks easily of feelings. Life out here doesn't encourage it." He took a deep breath. "But I find myself at a crossroads and I need to speak plainly." Her heart hammered in her chest. "Yes, these past weeks, getting to know you, they've meant more to me than I can properly express. Your courage, your intelligence, your way of seeing beyond the surface of things, they're qualities I've come to admire deeply." He met her gaze directly. "I'm saying I've developed feelings for you, strong feelings." Olivia felt her cheeks flush, but she held his gaze. "I feel the same way, Zach." Relief washed over his features, followed quickly by determination. "Then I need to ask about your plans, if you're staying in the West, if there might be a possibility for us." He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. "What I'm trying to ask, badly, is whether you might consider a future that includes me." The directness of the question, not quite a proposal but clearly heading in that direction, took her breath away. Yet it was perfectly in character for this man who valued truth above social niceties. "Zach, my work is important to me," she began carefully. "I would never ask you to give it up," he interrupted. "That's part of who you are, part of what He hesitated, then finished simply, "What I love about you." The word hung between them, honest and unadorned. Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. No man had ever valued her ambitions before, had seen them as compatible with love rather than obstacles to it. "I want to stay in the West," she said softly. "There are so many stories still to tell, and yes, I want those stories to include you, to include us." She took a step toward him. But I need to know that you truly understand what that means. I won't be a traditional wife, keeping house and staying quietly in the background. I would expect nothing less." A smile tugged at his mouth. "Though I should warn you, my cooking is terrible." "One of us will need to learn," she laughed, relief and joy bubbling up inside her. "We'll figure it out together." He closed the distance between them, setting his hat aside to take her hands in his. "Is that a yes, then, to us exploring a future together?" "It's a yes," Olivia confirmed. Then, feeling bold, she added, "And now I believe it's customary to seal such an agreement with a kiss." His eyebrows rose at her forwardness, but his eyes crinkled with pleasure. "As the lady wishes." When his lips met hers, Olivia felt as if all the pieces of her life were finally falling into place. This was what she had come west to find, not just stories to tell, but a love that allowed her to be fully herself. By Saturday, all of Greeley knew that Zachary Zane and Olivia Jensen were courting. The reactions varied from approval to speculation about how long the Eastern writer would actually remain once she'd had her fill of frontier hardships. But Olivia paid little attention to the whispers. She was too busy planning her next series of articles and accompanying Zach to look at the homestead claim he was considering. The land was everything he had described: 20 acres of good pasture beside a clear running creek, with a stand of cottonwoods providing natural shelter. The previous claimant had abandoned it after his wife died in childbirth, leaving a small but solid cabin that could be expanded. "It needs work," Zach acknowledged as they stood on what might become their front porch. "But there's potential here, room for a garden, maybe an orchard eventually. Good grazing for a small herd to start with. And a perfect writing room here," Olivia added, pointing to a corner of the cabin where windows would catch the morning light, with a view of the mountains. They spent the afternoon walking the property, discussing possibilities, planning a shared future. By the time they returned to town, they had made their decision. Zach would file the homestead claim on Monday, then spend the next month working at the ranch while preparing to move. Olivia would continue her articles, focusing next on the lives of ranch women like Julia Baldwin. At church the next morning, they made their courtship official by sitting together, ignoring the curious glances and whispered comments. After the service, Mayor Townsend approached them, his expression troubled. "Miss Jensen, might I have a word, privately?" Zach's eyebrows drew together, but Olivia squeezed his arm reassuringly. "I'll only be a moment." She followed the mayor to the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of the churchyard. "Miss Jensen, I've received word that your articles are to be published in Eastern newspapers." "Yes, Mayor, the response has been quite positive. I'm concerned about the content." His mouth pulled down at the corners. "Greeley is a respectable community with a reputation to maintain. We can't have stories circulating that might paint us in an unflattering light." Olivia felt a flash of indignation. "My articles are truthful accounts of women's lives here. There's nothing scandalous or sensationalized. Nevertheless, I would appreciate reviewing them before they're sent east. As mayor, I have a responsibility to protect." "No." The word came out more forcefully than she'd intended, drawing glances from nearby churchgoers. More quietly, she continued, "I'm sorry, Mayor Townsend, but I cannot allow that. Freedom of the press is a fundamental right." His face reddened. "You come to our town, insert yourself into people's lives, and then refuse the most basic courtesy." "I've been nothing but courteous," Olivia replied evenly. "I've interviewed only willing subjects and represented their experiences honestly. If there's something specific you fear will be revealed, perhaps that's a matter for your conscience, not my pen." This is exactly the kind of high-handed Eastern attitude that he broke off as Zach approached, his expression neutral but his posture unmistakably protective. "Everything all right here?" he asked mildly. "Perfectly fine," Olivia assured him. "The mayor and I were just discussing the importance of journalistic integrity." Townsend's face darkened further. "Zane, you do well to counsel your friend on the importance of community harmony." "Miss Jensen doesn't need my counsel on matters of principle," Zach replied, his tone still pleasant but with an edge of steel beneath. "And I believe she's made her position clear. The mayor looked between them, then turned abruptly and stalked away. Olivia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you for the support, though I could have handled him." "I know you could." Zach offered his arm, "but sometimes it helps to present a united front." As they walked back toward the center of town, several women from Olivia's interviews nodded greetings or stopped to chat briefly. The contrast with her first days in Greeley couldn't have been more striking. Where once there had been laughter and scorn, now there was respect, even friendship. That evening, as they sat on the bench outside the bookshop enjoying the cool night air, Olivia told Zach about the mayor's demand. "He won't be the last to try controlling your words," Zach warned. "Power doesn't like scrutiny, even the modest power of a frontier mayor." "I know. But I won't compromise on this." She leaned against his shoulder. "My whole life I've been told what I should write, how I should think. This is the first time I've truly found my voice. And it's a voice worth hearing." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Just be prepared for pushback. Not everyone appreciates truth as much as they claim to." His prediction proved accurate sooner than either expected. The next morning, Olivia received another telegram from her father. Mayor Townsend telegraphed demanding articles be withheld. Stop claimed misrepresentation and potential damage to town reputation. Stop. I refused. Stop. First article published yesterday to overwhelming reader response. Stop standing firm, but advise caution. Stop. Love father. When she showed the message to Zach, his mouth tightened. Townsend's overplayed his hand. Trying to suppress your work will only draw more attention to it. I should speak with the women I interviewed, Olivia decided. They deserve to know what's happening. She spent the day visiting each woman who had shared her story. Without exception, they expressed support for her work and indignation at the mayor's interference. He's always been too concerned with appearances, Sarah Blackburn observed, as if honest work and struggle are somehow shameful. Mei Lin, typically reserved, was unexpectedly vehement. Tell truth, always tell truth, is honor to have story told true. By evening, word had spread throughout Greeley. When Olivia and Zach entered Mrs. Lewis's dining room for supper, conversations quieted momentarily, then resumed with increased volume. Some glances were hostile, but many more were supportive or simply curious. They had just been served when Mayor Townsend entered with several town council members. He spotted them immediately and marched to their table. "Miss Jensen, I've just received a copy of the Boston Herald." "Your article is problematic. In what way specifically?" Olivia asked, remaining seated. "You focused exclusively on hardships and struggles, giving Eastern readers the impression that Greeley is a harsh, unwelcoming place." "Did you read the entire article, Mayor?" "Including the portions about community support, innovative solutions to frontier challenges, and the remarkable resilience of Greeley's women," he flushed. "That's beside the point. The damage is done. Potential settlers will be discouraged." "I disagree." Olivia's voice remained calm. "Honest accounts attract the kind of settlers who succeed here, those prepared for reality rather than seduced by false promises." "Furthermore," Zach added, "Miss Jensen's articles have generated more positive interest in Greeley than any official promotions. My friends at the stage office tell me they've had inquiries from 3 families specifically mentioning her writing." The mayor seemed momentarily at a loss, then his expression hardened. "The town council will be discussing this matter tonight. I suggest you consider your position carefully, Miss Jensen. Not everyone will be as accommodating as I've been." After he left, Olivia released a shaky breath. "I knew there might be opposition, but I never expected this level of hostility." "Men like Townsend are used to controlling the narrative," Zach said quietly. "You're challenging that control. It was bound to create friction." They finished their meal in subdued conversation, both aware of the eyes upon them. As they left the dining room, the owner of the general store stopped them at the door. "Miss Jensen, a word." When she nodded, he continued gruffly, "Just wanted you to know not everyone agrees with Townsend. Some of us appreciate someone finally telling the truth about life out here, good and bad." "Thank you, Mr. Collins. That means a great deal." Outside, the evening had turned cool, with clouds gathering over the mountains. Zach took her arm as they walked toward the bookshop. "I don't like where this is heading," he admitted. "Town politics can turn ugly. If the council decides to make an example of you, what could they do? I've broken no laws. They could make life difficult, pressure your landlord, encourage businesses not to serve you," he hesitated. "Or they could target me, knowing it would affect you." Olivia stopped walking, turning to face him in the gathering darkness. "I won't let that happen. If necessary, I can return to Boston." "Is that what you want?" "Of course not." She reached for his hand. "But I won't be the cause of harm to you or your prospects." "Our prospects," he corrected gently. "And we're not at that point yet. Let's see what develops before making decisions." They continued to the bookshop, where Zach left her with a lingering kiss and a promise to return in the morning. Olivia climbed the stairs to her room with a troubled heart, wondering how a project begun with such optimism had generated such division. She slept fitfully, waking at dawn to the sound of voices in the street below. Looking out her window, she saw a crowd gathering in front of the newspaper office across the way. People were reading something posted on the door, their reactions ranging from laughter to outrage. Dressing quickly, Olivia hurried downstairs and across the street. The crowd parted for her, some faces sympathetic, others hostile. On the newspaper office door was tacked a notice in bold print: "Public meeting tonight, 7 o'clock, Town Hall, to discuss the false and damaging writings of Miss Olivia Jensen and determine appropriate community response. All concerned citizens urged to attend. By order of the town council." Olivia felt her stomach clench. This was no longer about editorial control. This was a direct challenge to her integrity and potentially her safety. "Quite the commotion you've stirred up." She turned to find the newspaper editor, Mr. Griffith, standing behind her. A lean man in his 40s with ink-stained fingers and sharp eyes, he had been cordial but distant in their previous encounters. "It wasn't my intention," she said honestly. "Rarely is with good journalism." He gestured toward his office. "Got a minute to talk?" Inside, the small newspaper office smelled of ink and paper. Griffith cleared a stack of newspapers from a chair for her, then sat behind his cluttered desk. "I received a copy of your Herald article yesterday," he began. "Read it twice." "Solid work. Thank you. Townsend's in a lather because you've undermined the official line. He's been placing advertisements in Eastern papers promising easy prosperity to potential settlers. Your honest accounting of the challenges women face here doesn't fit his narrative." "But surely honest accounts serve everyone better in the long run," Griffith nodded. "I've been saying the same for years. Got run out of 2 towns before Greeley for printing unflattering truths about local officials." He leaned forward. "Tonight's meeting is a kangaroo court. They've already decided you're guilty of damaging the town's reputation. The only question is what they'll do about it." "What can they do? Legally, not much. Practically, they can make life impossible. Already there's talk of pressuring Harrison at the bookshop to evict you, getting businesses to refuse service." He paused. "And I hear Townsend's been asking pointed questions about Zane's homestead claim, suggesting it might be denied on technicalities." Olivia felt cold anger rise within her. "Using Zach to get to me is despicable. Politics often is." Griffith studied her for a moment. "What do you intend to do?" "Attend the meeting, defend my work and my reputation." "Dangerous strategy. These things can turn ugly." "I won't be driven out by intimidation. The women I wrote about deserve better than that." A slow smile spread across Griffith's weathered face. "I was hoping you'd say that. Got a proposition for you." He reached into a drawer and pulled out several sheets of paper. "This is my editorial for tomorrow's Greeley Gazette. I'm calling out Townsend and the council for attacking free press and attempting to suppress legitimate journalism." Olivia scanned the forceful text with growing appreciation. "This is quite powerful, Mr. Griffith, and potentially the end of my paper if advertisers pull out in retaliation. But sometimes principles matter more than profit." He fixed her with a level gaze. "I'm also offering you space in the Gazette for your articles. Regular column, fair pay. The Herald can have them after we publish." Why would you take such a risk for me? Not for you, Miss Jensen, for journalism. For truth, he shrugged. And because Townsend's been a thorn in my side for years, sometimes an outside perspective is exactly what a community needs. By the time Olivia left the newspaper office, the crowd had dispersed, but whispers followed her down the street. At the general store where she stopped to purchase writing paper, Mrs. Collins served her with a sympathetic smile. "Don't you worry about tonight," the shopkeeper's wife said quietly. "There are plenty of us who stand with you, especially the women." Zach found her at the bookshop an hour later, his expression grave. "I've heard about the meeting. News travels fast, in small towns always." He took her hands in his. "Olivia, I need to ask something important. Are you prepared for what might happen tonight?" "I think so." "Mr. Griffith has offered some support, and no, I mean personally." His blue eyes held hers intently. "If this goes badly, if they force the issue, would you consider leaving with me? Now, today, leaving, to where?" "The homestead claim. I filed the papers yesterday." "It's officially mine, ours, if you want it to be." He squeezed her hands gently. "We could be married by Judge Wilkins this afternoon, be on our way before the meeting even starts." Olivia's heart raced at the proposal, not just marriage, but immediate escape from the brewing conflict. For a moment, the temptation was overwhelming. "We could start fresh," Zach continued softly. "Build our life together without this cloud hanging over us. You could write your articles from there, mail them directly to Boston. And everyone would say I ran away because I couldn't face the consequences of my words," Olivia realized aloud. "That I knew my accounts were false and couldn't defend them." Zach's shoulders slumped slightly. "I knew you'd say that. Your integrity won't let you walk away." "It's not just integrity." She reached up to touch his face. "It's about standing up for every woman who trusted me with her story. If I flee now, I validate the idea that women's experiences don't matter, that they should remain silent and invisible." He turned his face to kiss her palm. "Then we face it together, tonight at the meeting. Are you sure? This could affect your standing in the community, your business prospects." "I'm sure about you," he said simply. "The rest we'll figure out as we go." The town hall was packed that evening, with people standing along the walls and spilling out onto the porch. Olivia and Zach arrived early enough to secure seats near the front, though the whispers and stares that followed them were difficult to ignore. Mayor Townsend and the council members sat at a long table on the raised platform at the front of the room. At precisely 7 o'clock, the mayor gavelled the meeting to order. "Citizens of Greeley, we are gathered to address a matter of grave concern to our community's future." His voice carried easily through the hall. "As you may know, Miss Olivia Jensen has published articles in Eastern newspapers that present a distorted, unflattering portrait of our town." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Olivia sat straight-backed, her face composed despite the churning in her stomach. "These articles," Townsend continued, "with their emphasis on hardship and struggle, threaten to discourage potential settlers, investors, and businesses from choosing Greeley. They undermine years of effort to build our reputation as a progressive, prosperous community." A council member at the table stood. "I move that we formally censure Miss Jensen and request a published retraction in all papers that carried her articles." "Second," called another councilman. "Before we vote," Townsend said, "I believe fairness demands we allow Miss Jensen to address the charges." "Miss Jensen," Olivia rose, conscious of every eye in the room upon her. She moved to the center aisle, then turned to face the crowd rather than the council table. "Citizens of Greeley," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I came to your town with one purpose: to tell the true stories of frontier women, stories largely absent from accounts of Western settlement. I sought to honor the courage, resourcefulness, and perseverance of women who make civilized life possible in challenging circumstances." She paused, scanning the faces before her, some hostile, some supportive, many simply uncertain. "In my interviews with your wives, mothers, sisters, and daughters, I found remarkable stories of triumph over hardship. Yes, I wrote honestly about those hardships, the isolation, the physical demands, the limited resources. But I also celebrated the solutions these women have developed, the communities of support they've built, and their unwavering commitment to creating homes and futures here. From the corner of her eye, she saw Sarah Blackburn stand. "She told my story true," the laundress called out. "Every word of it, and I'm proud for folks back east to know what we women out here are capable of." Mei Lin rose next, her voice accented but clear. "My story never told before. Miss Jensen, listen right with respect. This is honor, not shame." One by one, women throughout the hall stood: the midwife, the teacher, the baker, and dozens more Olivia had interviewed or who had read her accounts secondhand. Even Julia Baldwin, who must have traveled 10 miles from the ranch, rose to declare, "In 20 years out here, this is the first time anyone's bothered to ask about women's experiences. If that makes some men uncomfortable, perhaps they should examine why." Mayor Townsend banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order, this is not how town meetings are conducted." "Perhaps it should be," came a male voice from the back. Mr. Griffith stepped forward, a copy of his newspaper in hand. "Tomorrow's Gazette will feature an editorial supporting Miss Jensen's right to report honestly, along with the first in a series of her articles about local women. Any merchant who wishes to advertise alongside these pieces is welcome to contact me tonight." Townsend's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This meeting is about the damage done to our town's reputation." "No," Olivia interrupted, finding strength in the support around her. "This meeting is about whether Greeley values truth or prefers comfortable illusions. It's about whether women's experiences matter enough to be recorded and shared. It's about what kind of community you truly want to be." She turned to face the council table directly. "Mayor Townsend, I understand your concern for the town's image. But a community built on honesty about both its challenges and its triumphs will attract the kind of settlers who will thrive here, people prepared for reality, drawn by genuine opportunity rather than false promises." The mayor opened his mouth to respond, but a new voice cut him off, one of the oldest men in town, Mr. Harrington, who had been among the original settlers. "The lady's right." He leaned on his cane as he addressed the council. "When we founded this colony, we didn't sugarcoat the difficulties. We told folks plain what they'd face: hard work, harsh winters, uncertain harvests. Those who came anyway are the backbone of what we've built. Truth attracts quality, always has." Murmurs of agreement spread through the hall. Townsend looked around, clearly sensing the shifting mood. He conferred briefly with the other council members before speaking again. "Perhaps we have been hasty in our judgment." The words seemed to cost him considerable effort. "While concerns remain about potential misinterpretation by Eastern readers unfamiliar with frontier realities, we acknowledge Miss Jensen's right to report her observations." It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a significant retreat from the censure that had been proposed. Olivia nodded graciously, hiding her relief behind a composed expression. "Thank you, Mayor. I believe we all want what's best for Greeley. My work aims to honor this community, not harm it." As the meeting shifted to other town business, Olivia returned to her seat beside Zach, who squeezed her hand silently. Around them, people were already discussing what had happened, opinions divided but the immediate threat neutralized. Outside afterward, well-wishers surrounded them, women who had stood for her in the hall, men who valued free speech, and curious citizens wanting to meet the writer who had stood her ground against the town council. "You were magnificent," Zach said when they finally had a moment alone, walking back toward the bookshop under a sky brilliant with stars. "I've never been prouder to stand with someone." "I couldn't have done it without your support," Olivia replied, still processing the emotional evening. "Or without the women who spoke up. That's what community really means, people standing together for what's right." He stopped walking, turning to face her under the glow of a street lamp. "I know we plan to wait to establish the homestead first, but after tonight." He took both her hands in his. "Olivia Jensen, will you marry me? Not someday, but soon. I don't want to wait any longer to start our life together." In his face, she saw everything she had come west to find: honesty, courage, respect, and a love that embraced all of who she was, not just the parts that fit conventional expectations. "Yes," she said simply. "Soon." They were married 2 weeks later in a ceremony that reflected the community they had helped reshape. The entire town was invited, and while some still disapproved of Olivia's outspokenness, most had come to respect her integrity. The women she had interviewed formed an honor guard outside the church, and Mr. Griffith proudly gave her away in her father's absence, though James Jensen had sent a touching letter and generous wedding gift by express mail. Their new life at the homestead began with a harmony neither had dared hope for. The small cabin expanded room by room as Zach's carpentry skills transformed it into a comfortable home. Olivia established her writing desk by the window overlooking the mountains, just as she had envisioned, and continued her series on frontier women to growing acclaim. Her articles now appeared first in the Greeley Gazette, then in the Eastern papers, and finally were collected into a book titled Invisible Pillars: Women of the Western Frontier. The ranch grew slowly but steadily, with a small herd of cattle and several fine horses that Zach trained himself. In the second year, they hired a young couple to help with the expanding operation, building them a small cabin nearby and creating the beginnings of the community they had imagined. On their third anniversary, as they sat on their expanded porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, Olivia handed Zach a small package wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" he asked, turning it in his hands. "Open it." Inside was a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties. He stared at them for a long moment, then looked up at her with wonder in his eyes. "Really?" Olivia nodded, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "January, the doctor thinks." Zach gathered her into his arms, his joy too great for words. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "This place will be filled with stories for you to write." "The best stories," she agreed, nestling against him as the first stars appeared above the mountains. "True ones about courage and love and building something that matters." As darkness settled over their homestead, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here from the Boston publisher's daughter seeking independence to the respected journalist and beloved wife she had become. The town that had once laughed when she spoke had been silenced not by force but by truth, and that truth had led her to the happiness she now held in her arms. In the years that followed, Olivia and Zach's family grew to include 3 children, 2 daughters, and a son, all raised with the knowledge that truth mattered, that women's voices deserved to be heard, and that love flourished best when built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Their homestead became a gathering place for journalists, writers, and those whose stories needed telling, earning the nickname Truth Post among friends and visitors. And when their oldest daughter announced at 12 that she intended to become a newspaper publisher like grandfather, but better, neither Olivia nor Zach laughed. Instead, they built her a small press in the barn and helped her produce the region's first children's newspaper, knowing that courage often began with a single voice willing to speak, and that the most powerful legacy they could leave was the example of standing firmly for one's convictions, especially when others laughed.